The scent of old parchment and lavender usually calmed me, a familiar embrace in my small study. But that day, the aroma was tainted with the metallic tang of my son, Leo's derision. I'm Beatrice, 60 years young, though some days the weight of memory makes me feel older. Leo, then a brash 20-something on the cusp of launching his tech startup, had just waved a dismissive hand at my life's passion. Meticulously researched monographs on medieval guild ciphers hidden in textile patterns. "Honestly, Mom," he'd said, a smirk playing on his lips, the bright glare from his laptop screen reflecting in his eyes. "It's a cute hobby. Utterly useless in the real world, but cute." His laughter, sharp and confident, echoed in the quiet room, each note a tiny hammer, blow against the carefully constructed walls of my self-worth. The distant hum of the city, usually a comforting backdrop, suddenly felt like the world rushing past, leaving me and my useless skills behind. Like if this story touches you and subscribe for more. Where are you watching from? The drive home from Leo's minimalist, glass and steel incubator office that day, a place that hummed with the frantic energy of ambition and venture capital, so alien to my own quiet world, was a blur. The city lights smeared past my tear-filled vision, each one a mocking reminder of the bright, shiny future Leo was hurtling towards. A future in which my life's work, my intellectual passion, apparently held no currency. My small, slightly cluttered bungalow, normally a sanctuary of warm lamplight, familiar books, and the comforting scent of beeswax polish, felt that evening like a dusty attic filled with relics of a forgotten age. The useless skills he'd so casually derided weren't just a pastime. They were the core of who I had been, who I still, in some quiet, unacknowledged corner of my heart, aspired to be. My late husband, Arthur, would never have spoken to me like that. Arthur, a brilliant astrophysicist whose mind soared among galaxies, had possessed a profound respect for all forms of human knowledge. He'd been fascinated by my research into historical cryptography, particularly my focus on the symbolic languages embedded within the intricate textiles of medieval European guilds. He saw the connections I saw, the patterns, the logic, the hidden orders. "B," he'd say, his eyes alight with genuine interest as I'd show him a newly deciphered weaver's mark. "This is Stella. It's a whole universe of meaning, hidden in plain sight, like discovering a new constellation in an old tapestry." His belief in my work had been a steadying star in my own sky. We had met at university, two young academics buzzing with ideas and dreams. He was mapping distant nebulae. I was unraveling the coded messages of long-dead artisans. Our evenings were a symphony of intellectual curiosity, the air thick with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and the rustle of research papers spread across our dining table. I was on the tenure track in the history department, my dissertation on subversive stitch-coded resistance in Flemish Guild textiles, causing a minor stir for its unconventional approach. I'd envisioned a life of research, of writing, of illuminating these forgotten corners of human ingenuity. Then Arthur was gone. A brain aneurysm, swift and merciless, had extinguished his brilliant light when Leo was just a freckle-faced 10-year-old, obsessed with building fantastical Lego spaceships. The universe Arthur loved had, with cruel indifference, reclaimed him. My world fractured. The carefully mapped constellations of my future dissolved into a cold, dark void. The demands of single motherhood became my new, all-consuming reality. Grief was a heavy cloak, but Leo needed me, needed a semblance of stability in his shattered young world. The all-consuming nature of a tenure-track academic career, the endless grant applications, the publish or perish pressure, it was simply untenable. With a heavy heart, I stepped back. I found a position as a senior archivist at the city's historical society. It was a good job, a respectable one. It kept me surrounded by the whispers of the past, the tangible remnants of lives lived. I could still touch history, but I was no longer an active participant in its scholarly interpretation, merely its custodian. My research on guild ciphers, my nearly completed book manuscript, the intricate recreations I'd begun on my floor loom. They were relegated to my small home study, symbols of a path not taken, of a dream deferred. Useless skills, Leo had called them. Perhaps, in the harsh light of practical necessity, they had become so. Or perhaps they were simply waiting. I poured all my deferred ambitions, all my fierce maternal love, into Leo. He was a whirlwind of energy, a sharp, inquisitive mind that quickly outpaced my understanding of his chosen field, computer science. He devoured programming languages like they were candy, his fingers flying across keyboards, building digital worlds I could only dimly perceive. I paid for summer coding camps that cost a small fortune, scrimping on household expenses. I cheered him on when he won a scholarship to a prestigious tech-focused university, my heart swelling with a pride that was tinged with a bittersweet awareness of my own curtailed journey. I never let him see the latter. His future was the priority. His startup, Chrono Weave, launched with a blaze of youthful optimism and a hefty loan, co-signed by me, using my small inheritance from Arthur as collateral. The name itself was a strange irony, a constant subtle reminder of the tapestries and time-bound messages I studied. He and his co-founder, Zara Khan, were a formidable pair. Zara was a whirlwind of polished efficiency, a graduate of a top business school with an almost unnerving focus. She had sleek dark hair, an impeccable wardrobe of power suits, and a way of speaking in bullet points that made me feel rambling and ineffectual. She saw Leo's raw talent, and I suspected the commercial potential of his ideas, and she honed them with a ruthless precision. It was Zara, I think, who subtly amplified Leo's natural youthful impatience into something bordering on disdain for anything that wasn't cutting-edge, scalable, or capable of generating significant ROI. My quiet world of dusty archives and medieval symbolism must have seemed prehistoric to her, and Leo, eager to impress Zara, eager to conquer his chosen world, began to echo her perspectives. My closest friend, Carol Ashby, a woman whose intellect was as sharp as her wit, provided the much-needed counterpoint to Leo's burgeoning technocratic worldview. Carol, a retired history teacher who'd also volunteered at the Historical Society, had been my confidant since Arthur's death. She understood the intellectual rigor behind my hobby. "Useless skills?" Carol would exclaim, her voice laced with indignation, whenever I'd recount one of Leo's more dismissive comments. We'd be in my living room, a comforting haven of worn velvet armchairs and overflowing bookshelves, the scent of Earl Grey tea and her famous lemon drizzle cake filling the air. "Beatrice Holloway, don't you dare let that brilliant but blinkered boy diminish what you do. Your understanding of historical encryption, of the deep human need to communicate securely and subtly, is a profound intellectual achievement. These newfangled tech gurus, for all their talk of innovation, are often just reinventing ancient wheels with shinier materials. They lack historical perspective." "But, Carol, it is all in the past," I'd reply, a familiar weariness settling over me. "The world has moved on. Leo's world is about algorithms and quantum states, not knotted threads and hidden stitches." "Nonsense," Carol would declare, thumping her cup for emphasis. "The principles are timeless, Beatrice. The human desire to protect information, to embed meaning, to create layers of understanding. That's as relevant today as it was in the 14th century. He's so focused on the how of his technology that he's forgotten the why of human communication. Your work understands the why at its deepest level. Her unwavering belief was a balm, but it didn't entirely shield me from the insidious creep of self-doubt. I continued my research, but it felt increasingly like a solitary pursuit, a conversation with ghosts. I'd occasionally give a poorly attended lecture at a local community college or the Historical Society. My audience usually consisted of a few kindly retirees, and perhaps one or two earnest but bewildered history undergraduates. The academic journals that had once eagerly published my early work now found my niche, too. Niche. While Dr. Holloway's scholarship is undoubtedly meticulous, one rejection letter had stated with polite finality, its relevance to contemporary historical discourse is, regrettably, limited. Limited. Useless. The words echoed. Chronoweave, after a few near-death experiences that involved frantic calls from Leo asking for small bridge loans, finally hit its stride. They secured a major round of venture capital funding. Suddenly, Leo was a minor celebrity in the tech world. There were glossy articles in business magazines featuring him and Zara, looking impossibly cool and confident, talking about disrupting the paradigm of secure communications. He bought a sleek silver sports car that seemed to hum with barely contained power, and moved into a minimalist loft apartment in a converted warehouse downtown. The walls were bare concrete, the furniture was all sharp angles and chrome, and there wasn't a single comfortable chair or a personal photograph in sight. It felt less like a home and more like a showroom for a particularly austere brand of success. His visits to my bungalow became rarer, his phone calls shorter, more perfunctory. When he did deign to appear, he'd often bring Zara, and the two of them would exchange subtle, knowing glances as they surveyed my comfortable clutter, the piles of books, the half-finished tapestry on my loom, the slightly faded chintz armchair that had been Arthur's favorite. "You know, Mom," Leo said one Sunday, wrinkling his nose at a bowl of potpourri I'd made from dried roses and lavender from my garden, "you could really declutter this place. Get one of those minimalist consultants. And this scent, it's a bit overpowering. We could get you an ionizer." Zara nodded in agreement, her expression one of polite suffering. "A streamlined environment promotes streamlined thinking, Beatrice," she offered, as if quoting from a self-help manual for aspiring billionaires. "I like my things, Leo. And my scents," I'd replied, my voice tighter than I intended. "They tell stories. They have history." He'd sighed, that familiar sigh of a modern man burdened by an anachronistic parent. "Right. Well, if you ever change your mind, I know a guy." It was during one such visit, when he was trying to explain Chronoweave's latest breakthrough, involving something called multi-layered quantum key distribution, that he'd made the utterly useless comment about my work on guild ciphers. I had tried to draw a parallel, to explain how medieval weavers used layers of symbolic meaning, and he'd just laughed, that bright, dismissive sound that had echoed in my quiet study ever since. About 2 years after that memorable pronouncement, when Chronoweave was being touted as the next big thing in cybersecurity, Leo called. His voice, usually so self-assured, held an uncharacteristic note of strain. This wasn't a just checking in Mom call. "Mom, are you particularly busy right now?" he asked, the abruptness of the question a clear indicator of stress. "Not unduly, Leo. Is everything all right?" My maternal radar pinged. "Yeah, fine. Mostly." He paused, and I could hear the hum of what sounded like a frantic office in the background. It's just, we've landed this massive potential client. Huge. Game changer for us. But they're eccentric. Eccentric how? They're in the ultra-luxury sector. You know, ancient European family. Owns a brand that's been around for centuries. Bespoke luggage, haute couture, that sort of thing. Impeccable heritage. And they want this custom encryption system for their internal communications. Something absolutely unique to them. Something that reflects their brand's legacy. A tiny, almost imperceptible spark of interest ignited within me. Legacy encryption. You could call it that, he said, his voice tight with exasperation. They're rejecting all our standard algorithmic solutions. Zara's tearing her hair out. They say our stuff is too cold, too impersonal, too anonymous. They want something that feels handcrafted, something that tells a story. They use the word artisanal for crying out loud, about a security protocol. His frustration was palpable. This was the first clear sign that his world of pure tech might have limitations, a narrative hook that snagged my attention. What kind of artisanal story are they looking for? I asked, my archivist's instincts stirring despite my resolve to remain detached. That's the problem. They're incredibly vague, but incredibly insistent. They keep talking about historical ciphers, symbolic languages, hidden meanings. Stuff that sounds like it's straight out of one of your old books, Mom. There was no mockery in his voice this time, just a weary bafflement. Our top cryptographers, guys with PhDs from MIT, are completely stumped. They deal in advanced mathematics, neural networks, not 15th century doodles. I nearly blurted out a question about specific symbols or eras, then caught myself. Why should I offer my hard-won knowledge so freely to the son, who had so casually dismissed it? Well, Leo, I said, my voice carefully neutral. That does sound like a challenge. I wish you the best of luck with it. Yeah, right. Thanks, Mom, he mumbled, his disappointment evident even through the phone line. He sounded like a small boy again, one who'd been told he couldn't have the toy he desperately wanted. He hung up, leaving me with a disquieting mixture of emotions. A petty satisfaction at his predicament, immediately followed by a pang of maternal concern, and beneath it all, an undeniable, unwelcome flicker of professional curiosity. The dusty books and 15th century doodles he referred to were my lifeblood. Could it truly be that in some rarefied corner of his gleaming futuristic world, my antiquated knowledge suddenly held the key? The thought was both absurd and strangely, powerfully, compelling. The next few months passed with a deceptive surface calm. At the Historical Society, I was engrossed in a new project, cataloging and conserving a recently donated collection of 19th century samplers, their tiny, meticulous stitches often concealing personal narratives and even coded messages of their own. It was detailed, painstaking work, and I found a quiet solace in it. In my study at home, however, the encounter with Leo's problem had unsettled me. I found myself pulling out my old research on the Flemish guilds, particularly the Van der Velde lace makers, whose intricate ciphers had been my doctoral obsession. Their use of the weaver's shuttle as a primary symbolic carrier, its meaning subtly altered by knot patterns, thread counts, and even the depicted type of wood, was a masterpiece of covert communication. I had once believed I was on the verge of a major breakthrough in fully decoding their most complex master cipher. But Arthur's death and the subsequent shift in my life's priorities had left it unfinished. Now I felt a renewed pull towards those old mysteries. I heard nothing further from Leo about his eccentric client. I assumed Chronoweave had either, against the odds, found a solution, or more likely, had lost the lucrative contract. Life seemed to have returned to its predictable, quiet rhythm. Then, one blustery November afternoon, Carol Ashby swept into my small book-lined office at the Historical Society, her cheeks pink from the cold, her eyes sparkling with an almost conspiratorial excitement. She was brandishing her tablet computer like a medieval standard. "Beatrice, my dear, you absolutely must see this," she announced, her voice a stage whisper that probably carried to the main reading room. "It's right up your very specialized, very useless alley." She navigated to an online forum, one I knew well, Crypta Historica, a rather obscure corner of the internet, frequented by a motley collection of amateur historians, code breakers, and collectors of antique textiles. Carol, bless her, kept an eye on such places for me. The thread she pointed to was titled, "Urgent Query, Unidentified Heraldic Symbolic Device in Corporate Security Context." My breath caught. The original poster, writing under the pseudonym Perplexed Patrician, described an urgent problem. They were working for a prestigious heritage brand that required a unique, historically resonant security system. The client was fixated on incorporating a specific, recurring symbolic motif, ostensibly derived from their founder's ancestral connections. The in-house research team, despite significant resources, was unable to identify the origin or meaning of the symbol. The poster included a rather fuzzy, low-resolution image of the device in question. Even blurred, it was unmistakable. A stylized weaver's shuttle, crafted from what appeared to be dark wood, intertwined with a complex knot pattern featuring 7 distinct loops. My hand flew to my mouth. It wasn't just similar to the Van der Velde Guild mark. It was the specific variant used by the inner circle of the Guildmasters during a particularly turbulent period in the late 1580s. The 7-looped knot was a key identifier. This was the second narrative hook, the mystery symbol itself appearing out of the blue, confirming my nascent suspicions. "Carol," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly as I zoomed in on the image, my heart thudding against my ribs. This is the Van der Velde mastermark, the one I spent almost a decade trying to fully decipher. It's incredibly rare. Most of the records were thought to have been destroyed during the Bruges iconoclasm. Carol's eyes widened, her excitement palpable. "Are you absolutely certain, Beatrice? The very one from your nearly finished monograph? The one that pompous Professor Smedley at the University Press said was intriguing, but ultimately unprovable." "The very same," I confirmed, a wry, bittersweet smile touching my lips. Professor Smedley's dismissive rejection of my manuscript, just before Arthur's death, had been a significant blow, another factor in my retreat from active academia. "So, what does it signify?" Carol pressed, leaning closer to the screen. "And why on earth would a modern luxury brand be using it?" "It's not just a mark of identification," I explained, my mind racing, years of research flooding back with startling clarity. "It's the linchpin of their most secure cipher, the orientation of the shuttle, the precise execution of the 7-looped knot, the grain of the wood depicted. Each element is a variable in a complex polyalphabetic substitution system, cross-referenced with specific star charts and, I always suspected but could never definitively prove, with musical notations common at the time. It was designed to be unbreakable by outsiders." The anonymous poster, Perplexed Patrician, mentioned that their client was in the ultra-luxury fashion, leather goods, and bespoke travel accessories market. It had to be Leo's client. He hadn't solved the problem. He, or someone on his team, was now casting a desperate net into the obscure corners of the internet. And the answer, or at least the critical path to it, was sitting in my filing cabinet, in my useless and unprovable research. A maelstrom of emotions churned within me. A sharp, undeniable thrill of vindication. A profound, almost melancholic satisfaction that my decades of solitary work might finally have found its moment. And yes, a lingering maternal concern for Leo, who was clearly in far deeper trouble than he had let on. I didn't respond to the forum post directly. That would be too easy, too. Unearned for Leo. But I saved a copy of the image, the query, and the few bewildered responses it had garnered. That evening, in the quiet solitude of my study, surrounded by the comforting presence of my books and the faint, lingering scent of lavender and old parchment, I pulled out my unfinished monograph on the Van der Velde Guild. Its pages were brittle, yellowed at the edges, my own youthful, eager handwriting filling the margins with questions, hypotheses, and intricate diagrams. The past, it seemed, was not merely a collection of dusty relics. It was a living, breathing entity, and it was about to intersect with my son's hyper-modern world in a way neither of us could have ever predicted. The quiet power of this knowledge was a shield against the old sting of his disdain. My useless skills, it appeared, were about to become very useful indeed. Life, however, has a way of demanding its own pace. Weeks turned into a couple of months. I continued my work at the Historical Society, the quiet rhythm of archival duties a counterpoint to the reignited fire of my private research. The Van der Velde cipher consumed my evenings and weekends. It was like re-engaging with an old, complex, and deeply beloved friend. I cross-referenced my old notes with newly digitized archival material from Bruges and Ghent, often working late into the night, the glow of my computer screen illuminating my small study. Carol would call, eager for updates, her enthusiasm a welcome encouragement. "You'll crack it, Beatrice," she'd say. I always knew Smedley was a fool. Meanwhile, the tech blogs and financial pages started to paint a less rosy picture of ChronoWeave. There were subtle hints of cash flow problems, rumors of delayed product launches, and a noticeable drop in their previously buoyant stock valuation. Zara Khan's usually ubiquitous presence at tech conferences and on social media had dwindled to almost nothing. The ambitious Prometheus security platform, which Leo had once boasted would make them industry leaders, was conspicuously absent from their recent announcements. The demanding luxury client and their unsolved heritage encryption puzzle was clearly taking a heavy toll. This slow burn of bad news was the third narrative hook, a clear indication of ChronoWeave's precarious financial situation. One bleak, rain-lashed Saturday morning in early March, my doorbell rang. It was Leo. I hadn't seen him in person for nearly 4 months, though we'd had a few strained, perfunctory phone calls. The change in him was shocking. The sharp, bespoke suit he wore looked rumpled, as if he'd slept in it. His usually meticulously styled hair was unkempt, and there were deep, purplish hollows under his eyes. The cocksure swagger that had always defined him was gone, replaced by a raw, palpable anxiety that seemed to vibrate off him in waves. "Mom," he said, his voice hoarse, devoid of its usual confident timbre. I need to come in. We have to talk. Urgently." He didn't even glance at my study as he passed it, didn't make his usual faintly condescending remarks about the number of books I owned or the old lady scent of lavender. He slumped onto my chintz armchair, Arthur's chair, a piece of furniture he'd once laughingly suggested I should donate to a museum of bad taste. He looked small and defeated in its faded floral embrace. It's bad, Mom, he began, his gaze fixed on a point somewhere beyond my living room wall. Really bad. Chrono Weave is... We're on the brink. He explained, the words tumbling out in a torrent of stress and despair. The luxury client, Dubois-Lemaire, a centuries-old Parisian house of haute couture and bespoke leather goods, was their flagship account, the one upon which their entire Series B funding round and their stock valuation rested. Dubois-Lemaire was threatening to pull their massive contract and sue for breach if ChronoWeave couldn't deliver on the promised heritage encryption system within the next 4 weeks. They're utterly fixated on this historical authenticity thing, Leo groaned, running a hand distractedly through his hair, making it stand on end. They found some obscure reference in their founders' journals to a secret language of the artisans, connected to his family's Flemish weaving ancestry. They want that, or something like it. Our best people, our AI, everything we've thrown at it, nothing works. It's not a conventional cryptographic problem, it's like trying to teach a computer to understand poetry. He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, hunted expression. Zara remembered you talking once, a long time ago, about your research into old codes, symbols in textiles, that kind of thing. She said it was a 1,000,000 to 1 shot, but maybe, just maybe, you might have encountered something, anything, that could give us a clue, a starting point. The moment had arrived, stark and unadorned. His world, the world of gleaming technology and limitless ambition, had collided with a problem it couldn't solve, and the potential, improbable key lay in my quiet study, amidst my useless skills and my dusty old books. I didn't speak immediately. I let the silence stretch, let the weight of his desperation fill the room. Then I rose, walked over to my antique walnut secretaire, and unlocked a small hidden drawer. From it, I withdrew my meticulously organized file on the Van der Velde Guild, including the printout from the Crypta Historica Forum, and my own extensively annotated copy of the fuzzy shuttle image. I also took out my nearly completed monograph, the one Professor Smedley had dismissed. I laid them on the coffee table in front of him. "This guild," I began, my voice calm, measured, betraying none of the complex emotions churning within me. "The Van der Velde lacemakers of Bruges, active from roughly 1560 to 1620. This symbol," I tapped the image of the shuttle and the 7-looped knot, "was their master mark, used exclusively by the guild elders. It's not merely heraldic. It's the primary key to their most secure cipher system, a system so complex, so layered that it has baffled historians for centuries. The knot pattern, the shuttle's orientation, the number of visible threads, the precise angle of inclination, even the subtle variations in the depiction of the wood grain. Every element is a variable in a multi-stage alphanumeric substitution cipher, which is then further encrypted by cross-referencing with specific, period-appropriate astronomical charts and, I strongly believe, certain Flemish folk melodies that acted as mnemonic keys." Leo stared at the documents, then at me, his face a mask of stunned disbelief. The color had drained from his cheeks, leaving him looking pale and almost fragile. You actually know what this is?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "You understand it?" "This was my specialized field of academic research for over 15 years, Leo," I said, a subtle emphasis on the was, a quiet reminder of the career I had largely forgone. "Before I became, as you so kindly put it, just Mom with her cute, utterly useless hobbies." His head snapped up, The memory of his own words delivered with such casual disdain years ago now hung in the air between us, heavy and accusatory. A dark flush spread up his neck. He looked for the first time since he was a small boy, caught red-handed in some mischief, utterly ashamed. You think you could help us?" he asked, the question almost inaudible, stripped of all his usual bravado. "With this?" "Perhaps," I said, allowing a small, enigmatic smile to touch my lips. "My skills, as you've noted, are rather niche. But this particular niche seems to be one where Chrono-Weave currently finds itself in desperate need. However, Leo, my expertise, should I choose to offer it, does not come cheap, and it certainly doesn't come as a maternal favor to the son who so publicly devalued it. If Chrono-Weave wishes to engage my services as a specialist consultant, we can discuss terms. Terms that will reflect the unique and, dare I say, potentially company-saving value of deciphering a 400-year-old useless skill." He stared at me, a maelstrom of emotions flickering across his face. Shock, disbelief, a dawning, horrified respect, and overriding it all, the stark terror of a man watching his empire crumble. He saw the unyielding resolve in my eyes, the quiet strength that had always been there, patiently waiting beneath the surface of the accommodating mother he thought he knew. He swallowed hard. "Okay, Mom," he said, his voice raspy. The fight, the arrogance, had completely drained out of him. "Okay, as a consultant, a specialist consultant, tell me your terms." The old parchment and lavender in my study suddenly seemed to smell not of obsolescence, but of power. The power of knowledge, patiently accrued, deeply understood, and now, finally, recognized for its true, incalculable worth. The game had changed. The ensuing week was a blur of intense activity, a strange juxtaposition of ancient scholarship and modern corporate urgency. Leo, looking chastened and profoundly stressed, formally engaged me as a specialist consultant to Chrono-Weave. The contract, drafted by Tom Henderson Jr., was comprehensive. It stipulated a significant upfront fee, a daily consulting rate that made my eyes water slightly, and a very substantial success bonus, contingent on Dubois-Lemaire accepting the final encryption solution. It also, at my insistence, included full intellectual property rights for me over any new historical interpretations or cipher methodologies developed during the project. I was not just helping, I was an independent expert, and the terms reflected that. Zara Khan, Leo's co-founder, arranged a video conference. Her usual razor-sharp, slightly intimidating demeanor was noticeably softened, replaced by a wary, almost deferential curiosity. She listened, without interruption, as I outlined the sheer complexity of the Van der Velde master cipher, emphasizing that this was not a simple code, but a multi-layered system of symbolic logic deeply embedded in the cultural, artistic, and even scientific context of its time. "This isn't just about finding a key, Miss Khan," I explained. "It's about understanding a lost mindset, a different way of perceiving and encoding information. It will require more than just linguistic decoding. It needs historical empathy." My quiet study, usually a haven of solitary contemplation, became the unlikely nerve center of Chrono-Weave's most critical project. I unearthed boxes of research notes I hadn't opened in 2 decades, rolls of microfilm containing obscure guild records from Bruges and Antwerp, my collection of antique lace bobbins and shuttles, and even the partially completed tapestry recreation of a Van der Velde masterwork that had lain dormant on my loom for years. The familiar scent of old parchment and lavender was now punctuated by the hum of my new, high-powered laptop and the aroma of endless cups of strong black coffee. Leo assigned 2 of ChronoWeave's most promising young software engineers to work directly with me. Priya Sharma, a brilliant logician with a PhD in computational linguistics, and an unexpected minor in Renaissance art history. And Sam Chen, a coding prodigy with an almost reverent appreciation for complex systems, whether digital or historical. Their initial skepticism was palpable. They were accustomed to the clean, predictable logic of algorithms, the binary certainties of code. My world of faded manuscripts, ambiguous symbols, and historical conjecture must have seemed like an alchemical laboratory. "So, Dr. Holloway," Priya began during our first intensive work session, surrounded by my overflowing bookshelves and tables laden with historical artifacts, her tone polite but with an undertone of professional doubt. "You genuinely believe that a socio-linguistic encryption system, developed by 16th century Flemish lacemakers, can be reverse-engineered and then re-engineered to provide robust, quantum-resistant security for a 21st century global luxury brand's digital communications." "Ms. Sharma," I replied, meeting her gaze with a calm assurance I didn't entirely feel, but knew was crucial to Project. The Vandervelde Guildmasters were not merely artisans. They were astute businessmen, political players and guardians of immensely valuable trade secrets in a highly competitive and often dangerous world. Their ciphers were not quaint affectations. They were tools of economic survival and cultural identity. The principles of information security, confidentiality, integrity, authentication are not modern inventions. The Vandervelde Guild understood them implicitly. Their technology was thread, shuttle, and loom, augmented by shared esoteric knowledge. Yours is silicon, light, and algorithm. The challenge lies in translating the underlying logic of their system into a language your systems can understand and replicate, while preserving its unique aesthetic and symbolic resonance. I began to walk them through the layers of the cipher as I understood it. I showed them how the seemingly decorative elements of the shuttle mark, the precise number of incised lines representing threads, the subtle curvature of the shuttle's tip, the specific species of wood implied by the carved grain, each corresponded to a numerical value. These values, in turn, were used in a complex grid system, similar to a Polybius square but far more intricate, to substitute letters and numbers. "But this is just the first layer," I explained. "The true ingenuity lies in the secondary and tertiary encryptions." Sam, who had been quietly sketching the shuttle mark in his notebook, looked up, his eyes alight with dawning comprehension. "It's like a multi-factor authentication, but analog. Each visual element is a factor." "Precisely, Mr. Chen," I affirmed. "And the factors themselves are not arbitrary. They are deeply rooted in the Guild's specific cultural and operational context." The work was painstaking, exhilarating, and utterly exhausting. I was not just decoding symbols. I was reconstructing a forgotten worldview, trying to think like a 16th century Flemish artisan, to understand their numerological beliefs, their reverence for certain saints, their knowledge of local flora and fauna, all of which, I was convinced, played a part in the cipher's construction. I spent hours comparing the shuttle mark to illustrations in Renaissance-era herbals and bestiaries, looking for correlations. Leo, meanwhile, was a constant, anxious presence. He hovered, offered coffee, asked for updates with a frequency that bordered on frantic. The pressure from Dubois-Lemaire was immense. Their CEO, the formidable Madame Lucille Dubois-Lemaire herself, a direct descendant of the original founding family, had requested a personal demonstration of the conceptual framework within 3 weeks. "Any breakthroughs, Mom?" Leo would ask, his voice tight with an anxiety that mirrored my own exhaustion. Madame Dubois-Lemaire is... well, she's not known for her patience, or her forgiveness if we fail. Progress is methodical, Leo, not magical, I'd reply, trying to keep the weariness from my voice. The late nights, fueled by coffee and adrenaline, were taking their toll. We are essentially performing archaeological cryptography. It takes time to unearth and interpret the layers. One particularly late night, as I was meticulously comparing high-resolution images of the shuttle mark with astronomical charts from a 1585 almanac printed in Antwerp, a long shot based on a marginal note in one of Arthur's old astronomy texts about guild navigation. I found it. A specific constellation, Lyra, whose outline, when overlaid with the shuttle, corresponded perfectly with a series of previously unintelligible micro-notations on the guild's original charter. Lyra, the lyre, often associated with Orpheus and the power of music and hidden meanings. And the Van der Velde Guild was known to have close ties with the Musicians' Guild in Bruges. This was the missing link, the tertiary layer I had long suspected but never proven, a musical cipher. Specific Flemish folk melodies, popular in the late 16th century, whose notes, when transcribed using a particular solfeggi system, corresponded to the alphanumeric grid generated by the shuttle and the astronomical alignment. It was breathtakingly complex, an intellectual symphony of art, science, and music. My heart pounded with the thrill of discovery. It felt as if Arthur himself, with his love for the stars and his quiet encouragement, had reached across the chasm of years to guide my hand. This was more than just a code. It was a testament to the interconnectedness of knowledge, the rich tapestry of human intellect. The next morning I explained this musical astronomical layer to Priya and Sam. Priya, whose quiet skepticism had gradually transformed into fascinated respect, listened with rapt attention. That's astonishing, Dr. Holloway," she breathed when I finished. "It's a form of steganography combined with a one-time pad principle, where the pad is a shared cultural repertoire of music and astronomical knowledge. It's incredibly elegant, and for its time it would have been virtually unbreakable by anyone not privy to all 3 layers of initiation." Sam was already scribbling furiously, his mind clearly racing with the algorithmic possibilities. "We can model this. The visual elements generate the primary key, the astronomical alignment acts as a time-sensitive seed, and the musical notation provides the final randomization sequence. It's beautiful." The dynamic between Leo and me continued to evolve during these intense weeks. The initial awkwardness of our new professional relationship gradually gave way to a more nuanced interaction. He saw me in my element, commanding the respect of his brightest engineers, wielding my specialized knowledge with a quiet authority. The patronizing son was slowly, almost imperceptibly, being replaced by a man witnessing a profound intellectual power he had never acknowledged. He started spending more time in my study, not just to anxiously monitor progress, but to observe, to listen. He'd bring me cups of tea, ask tentative questions about the historical context of the ciphers, his old dismissiveness replaced by a hesitant curiosity. One afternoon he found me carefully examining a fragment of antique Flemish lace under a magnifying glass, comparing its intricate knotwork to a diagram from my research. "It's actually incredibly detailed, isn't it?" he said quietly, peering over my shoulder. "I always just thought it was, old doilies." "This old doily, Leo," I said without looking up, "contains a hidden inventory list for a shipment of spices from the Levant, a warning about a rival merchant, and a rather cheeky limerick about the local magistrate, all encoded in the number of picots the tension of the threads, and the sequence of the knots. He was silent for a long moment. Then, "When I was a kid, you tried to show me some of your research, remember? You had that big book with all the strange drawings. I told you it was boring, and went to play on my computer." "You were 10, Leo," I said, a faint smile touching my lips. Computers were definitely more exciting than 16th century trade disputes for a 10-year-old. "No, but even later," he admitted, his voice low, tinged with a shame that felt raw and genuine. "When I was in university, and you were still occasionally publishing in those small journals, I told my friends my mom was into antique knitting patterns. I was an arrogant fool, Mom. I belittled something that was your passion, your life's work, because I didn't understand it and because it wasn't new and shiny and part of my world." This was more than an apology for a single comment. It was an acknowledgement of a pattern of disrespect, a confession of a deeper failing. "You were very focused on building your own future, Leo," I said, my voice softer now. The old hurt was still there, but it was being overlaid by something new, something akin to understanding. "That's not an excuse for not seeing what was right in front of me," he said, looking me directly in the eye. "For not respecting your intellect, your dedication. I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it, for being so blind for so long." The sincerity in his voice, the palpable regret in his gaze, disarmed me more effectively than any corporate negotiation. This was the breakthrough that mattered most, not the deciphering of an ancient code, but the tentative recoding of our own fractured relationship. The day of the presentation to Madame Lucille Dubois-Lemaire arrived like a judgment. We convened in Chrono Weave's starkly modern boardroom, a place that felt light years away from the cozy, historical chaos of my study. Leo was a taut bundle of nerves, pacing restlessly. Zara, impeccably dressed as always, exuded a brittle composure that didn't quite conceal the anxiety in her eyes. Priya and Sam, armed with their laptops and a sleek presentation, looked both excited and terrified. I, surprisingly, felt a profound sense of calm. I had done my part. The knowledge was sound. Madame Dubois-Lemaire entered the room like a queen entering her court. She was a woman of indeterminate age, with an aura of timeless elegance and shrewd intelligence. Her silver hair was swept into an impeccable chignon. Her tailored suit was the epitome of understated Parisian chic, and her eyes, sharp and discerning, missed nothing. Priya and Sam delivered the technical part of the presentation flawlessly, explaining how they had translated the multi-layered logic of the Van der Velde cipher into a cutting-edge digital encryption system. They demonstrated how messages could be encoded into unique, visually stunning patterns reminiscent of antique textiles, each pattern a unique key in itself, its security exponentially enhanced by the astronomical and musical layers. Then, it was my turn. I spoke not of algorithms or code, but of the Van der Velde Guild masters, their world, their motivations. I explained the cultural significance of the shuttle, the numerological importance of the 7-looped knot, the symbolism embedded in the choice of constellations and melodies. I painted a picture of a system born not just of a need for security, but of a deep reverence for craftsmanship, heritage, and the intricate beauty of hidden knowledge. Madame Dubois-Lemaire listened intently, her expression unreadable, her fingers steepled beneath her chin. She asked a series of incisive, deeply informed questions about the historical evidence, the cryptographic robustness, the potential for artistic adaptation. I answered each one calmly, thoroughly, drawing upon decades of research. When I finished, A profound silence filled the boardroom. Leo held his breath. Zara's knuckles were white as she gripped her pen. Then Madame Dubois-Lemaire leaned forward, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across her face, transforming her stern features into an expression of genuine delight. "Dr. Holloway," she said, her voice a rich contralto. "This is not merely encryption. This is poetry. It is art. It is the very soul of heritage, brought to life with the ingenuity of the modern age. It is precisely what Dubois-Lemaire has been searching for. It is, in a word, magnifique." She turned to me, her eyes gleaming with respect. "Your erudition, Doctor, your profound understanding of these useless skills, as your son so charmingly once called them, it is not only useful, it is, in this context, utterly priceless." Leo let out a shaky breath, slumping slightly in his chair, as if a massive weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Zara actually broke into a broad, relieved smile. The contract with Dubois-Lemaire was secured. Chrono-Weave was pulled back from the precipice, and it had been saved not by a revolutionary algorithm or a quantum leap in technology, but by the patient unraveling of a 400-year-old lace-maker's secret, a secret resurrected from the dusty old books of a mother whose intellect her son had for too long failed to see. The irony was as intricate and satisfying as any Van der Velde cipher. The successful Dubois-Lemaire contract acted as a powerful catalyst, not just for Chrono-Weave, but for my own life and my relationship with Leo. The news of their unique heritage encryption system, so artfully blending history with cutting-edge technology, created a significant buzz in both the tech world and the luxury goods sector. Chrono-Weave, once teetering on the brink, suddenly found itself a sought-after innovator in a highly specialized niche. Other heritage brands, intrigued by the Dubois-Lemaire story, began to make discreet inquiries. Leo and Zara, profoundly humbled by their near-catastrophic failure and subsequent improbable rescue, underwent a significant philosophical shift. The relentless pursuit of aggressive growth and disruption at all costs was replaced by a more considered approach, valuing quality, uniqueness, and, dare I say it, even a touch of historical gravitas. My role as a consultant evolved from a temporary crisis intervention to a more permanent, though still flexible, advisory position. I established a small, historical cryptography and symbolic systems research unit within Chrono-Weave, with Priya Sharma as its lead technical integrator and Sam Chen as a key developer. It was immensely satisfying to mentor these bright young minds, to see their purely logical approaches enriched by the nuances of historical context and cultural interpretation. We explored other historical encryption methods, from ancient Scythian knot ciphers to Renaissance musical codes, always with an eye to their potential for modern adaptation. It was intellectually invigorating, a true renaissance of my own academic passions, now validated and valued in a way I had never dreamed possible. The substantial success bonus from the Dubois-Lemaire project, combined with my ongoing consulting fees, provided me with a level of financial independence I hadn't experienced since Arthur was alive. The first thing I did was establish the Arthur Holloway Memorial Grant for Interdisciplinary Research in Historical Sciences at the city's main university, aimed at supporting scholars whose work, like my own, often fell between traditional, disciplinary cracks and struggled for funding. Carol Ashby, with her characteristic enthusiasm, agreed to sit on the selection committee. It felt like a fitting tribute to Arthur's expansive intellect and a way to nurture the kind of scholarship that had so enriched my own life. Leo, however, was the most profound transformation. The ordeal had stripped away his youthful arrogance, leaving behind a more thoughtful, introspective man. He sold his flashy sports car, trading it for a sensible hybrid, and moved out of his sterile loft into a smaller, warmer apartment, one that actually had bookshelves. He started visiting me regularly, not out of obligation or crisis, but seemingly for the simple pleasure of my company. Our conversations changed. He no longer dominated them with talk of stock options and server capacities. Instead, he asked about my research, about the historical periods I studied, about the lives of the artisans whose secret languages I deciphered. He listened, truly listened, with a genuine curiosity that was both touching and, at times, a little overwhelming. He even started reading history books, asking for my recommendations. One Saturday afternoon, he found me in my study, attempting to recreate a particularly complex segment of the Van der Velde master cipher on my floor loom. He watched in silence for a long time as my hands moved among the threads, the shuttle flying back and forth. "It's mesmerizing, Mom," he said finally, his voice filled with a quiet awe. "The way you make the patterns emerge, it's like you're composing music with thread." "In a way, Leo, that's exactly what it is," I replied, smiling. He hesitated, then asked, "Do you think... could you teach me? Just the basics. I'd like to understand it better. Not just the theory, but the feel of it." And so I found myself teaching my tech tycoon son the ancient art of weaving. His first attempts were predictably clumsy. His large hands, so adept at navigating keyboards and touchscreens, struggled with the delicate tension of the threads, the precise throw of the shuttle. The patterns he produced were uneven, the knots often tangled, but he persisted, his brow furrowed in concentration, his usual impatience replaced by a surprising tenacity. "This is incredibly difficult, Mom," he'd sigh, painstakingly undoing a misplaced thread. "The level of focus, the precision. It's a different kind of logic altogether." "It is, Leo," I'd say, gently guiding his hands. "It's the logic of patience, of incremental creation, of meaning, embedded in every single choice. There are no shortcuts in this kind of work." He nodded slowly, a dawning understanding in his eyes. He was learning more than just a craft. He was learning a different way of thinking, a different set of values. Our relationship, once so unbalanced, found a new, more harmonious equilibrium. It wasn't a simple return to the uncomplicated affection of his childhood. Too much had passed between us for that. But it was something deeper, more resilient, built on a hard-won foundation of mutual respect and a shared understanding of past mistakes and present growth. He saw me not just as his mother, the provider of unconditional support and a vaguely embarrassing hobbyist, but as Dr. Beatrice Holloway, a scholar of unique expertise, a woman whose intellect had saved his company and, in many ways, reshaped his worldview. And I, in turn, saw him not just as my ambitious, sometimes thoughtless son, but as a man capable of profound humility, genuine remorse, and the courage to learn and change. One crisp spring morning, nearly a year after the Dubois-Lemaire triumph, Leo arrived at my bungalow for our now customary Sunday brunch. He was carrying a small, awkwardly wrapped package. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, a shy, almost boyish smile on his face. Inside the package, nestled on a bed of tissue paper, was a beautifully crafted weaver's shuttle. It was carved from a rich, dark cherry wood, its surface polished to a warm gleam. It was an almost perfect replica of a 16th century Van der Velde shuttle, but with a subtle, almost imperceptible difference. Intricately carved into its side, so small they were almost invisible without close inspection, were my initials, BH, rendered in a delicate, flowing script that I recognized as a variant of a cipher I had recently been working on with Priya. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the beautiful craftsmanship. Leo. Oh, Leo, it's exquisite. Priya helped me with the initial design, based on your original research sketches, he explained, his voice a little thick. And I did the carving of the initials myself. It took me weeks. It's not perfect, I know. It was in its own way, utterly perfect. It was more than a gift. It was a symbol of his understanding, his respect, his apology, and his love, all meticulously carved into the wood. It was a message, encoded not for secrecy, but for profound, heartfelt connection. Later that day, after Leo had left, I sat in my sun-drenched study. The scent of old parchment and lavender felt clean, pure, imbued with a quiet sense of triumph. My new shuttle rested on my desk, beside a stack of proofs for my forthcoming book, The Silent Looms, Cipher Symbol, and Society in Medieval Flemish Textiles, to be published by a prestigious university press that had, ironically, once rejected Professor Smedley's rather pedestrian work. The sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the intricate threads on my loom, where a new pattern was slowly, deliberately taking shape. A pattern that wove together ancient symbols with a distinctly modern aesthetic, a testament to the enduring power of knowledge, the unexpected beauty of intergenerational connection, and the profound satisfaction of a life's passion, once dismissed, now fully and gloriously reclaimed. The threads of the past, I knew with a deep, quiet certainty, were not meant to bind us to outdated notions, but to provide the strong, resilient warp for weaving even richer, more meaningful futures. And as I picked up my new shuttle, its smooth, hand-carved wood warm and familiar in my grasp, I felt a sense of peace and a quiet, unshakable joy that was more precious than any coded treasure.
Did you enjoy the story? Subscribe, hit the like button, and comment what you thought. Pick a link on the screen for more stories.